So non-vascular plants, these were the first ever plants to ever be on land. Yay! And we're going to look at some of them today. Some of the earlier non-vascular plants need to be submerged in water from time to time. So there would probably have been like this growth that just sort of stretched itself onto the land, but in areas where water would still be washing up all over it, like beaches. Or one of them that we're going to look at today, it grows only specifically on rocks that are like in the river. Big rocks like on the side of the river. And you'll be able to see them. You can find them all over the place at that Honey Run waterfall. Just kind of fun. So these are non-vascular plants. They're called non-vascular because they don't have what we call vascular tissue, which are tissues that will conduct the water from their roots through their shoots to the end of the plant. Which means, tell me about the size these plants could probably get to.
Small.
Yeah, they're going to be pretty small, right? Because the water is down there. They need it up here. They can't be real big or they would not get the water up here. And as a result, they're really small and they need to live in really, really wet places. We call them the non-vascular plants because they're non-vascular. They have no vascular tissue. Think of your cardiovascular system. What is that system? If you're working on your cardio, you're strengthening your cardiovascular system. What is that system? It has to do with your endurance. Let's get scientifical here.
Your heart?
Your heart. Your heart's part of it. What's your heart do?
Beats.
Good. Good. Pumps blood through the body, through the, what do we call those things? Blood what? Blood vessels. That's a vascular system. Your cardiovascular system. That's the system of vascular tissue carrying those things through your body. We focus mostly on carrying oxygen because that's how we roll. For plants, we're mostly going to focus on carrying water because that's more important for plants than oxygen is, which is weird because of photosynthesis. All right, so here are some of the key features. They're small. The gametophyte, the haploid generation, is their dominant generation. When you're looking at a non-vascular plant, you are looking at the haploid version of that plant. See, and you thought haploid was just for gametes. Nope, there's a whole plant, a whole living organism, has all the things of being alive. Gametophyte, the gamete plant. Those gametophytes produce sperm that has to swim through the water, hence an even deeper need to be in a watery environment. If you get really lucky, you can actually watch them. You can take your microscope out and you can actually see little non-vascular plant sperm swimming with its little flagella over to the lady gametophyte plant. Just like fish. The sporophyte grows out of the gametophyte, and it usually grows out of the gametophyte as a parasite. It has no ability to do photosynthesis. It's usually not even green. Grows right out of the gametophyte and leaches the energy out of it. It'd be like if your baby grew out like the side of your body and hung out there and just like never fed itself, just leached off of like the umbilical cord, never got cut. Insert mommy boy reference joke here.
Can these non-vascular plants asexually reproduce?
No, they pretty much do the sex all the time. No, yeah, they don't have a main method for asexual reproduction like strawberries do. Now, those sporophytes that make spores, they get produced at the top, and those are wind-propagated tools. This is how they sort of colonize the land. Remember when we talked about succession? We talked about primary succession, even secondary succession, but especially primary succession. You need those colonizing plants to spread their wind-based propagules around. We were talking about non-vascular plants. There's three main types, and they all go through this thing called the alternation of generations. This one's kind of confusing and hard, so we're going to spend a little bit of time here. Essentially, it works like this. I have my cheat sheet over here that you can't see purposefully. The main form of the plant, and you're going to want to take a little space to draw this. Moss is totally a non-vascular plant. It kind of even looks like moss. So let's say we have some nice green moss. Here it is. It looks like grass, but it's not. It's moss. Hashtag no trolling. That's why I disable YouTube comments. We have the moss. This moss is totally haploid. Half set of DNA. That's it. N. Half DNA compared to what would be normal for moss plants. And it does this thing called mitosis. Oh man. To make the gametes. See, now it's all kinds of crazy because you thought that mitosis made normal cells and meiosis makes gametes. Well, not in plants. The gametophyte does mitosis to make gametes that are also, guess how much DNA they have? Yeah, still half. That's it. All right, so we got egg, the ova, and we've got sperm. Squiggly sperm. Swims on over. Plant sexy times. And what's the word for the plant sexy times when the combining, the fusion of the two gametes, what do we call that? It's an F word that you are allowed to say in school. And no, that is not an invitation to say the F word that you are not allowed to say in school.
Fertilization.
That's called fertilization. There you go. That's called fertilization. And that fertilization usually occurs down here in the water somewhere. That fertilization creates your little zygote. And that zygote, how much DNA is it going to have? 2n, good, because we got a haploid gamete plus a haploid gamete. N plus n is 2n. And that zygote is going to grow and develop. You guys ready for the best part, though? It grows and develops as a parasite out of the gametophyte. Here's a gametophyte still. Here's a sporophyte growing right out of it. Usually it's kind of tall. Totally parasitic. Leaches all the nutrients that the moss spends all its hard time making, just pulls it right out. So this right here, this is the dividing line. Up here, we're in the gametophyte generation. The sporophyte does what all good sporophytes do. It makes, you guessed it, it makes spores. Guess what, though? The spores are actually the propagules to spread the gametophytes around. The spores are haploid. They're part of the gametophyte generation. Now look, if we got a diploid sporophyte making haploid spores, what's that process called? Going from diploid down to haploid with cell division. Parker? Meiosis. No, it's meiosis. Worstly drawn meiosis ever. Missed the whole two because I'm recording. And this is what we call the alternation of generations. Literally, it's the offspring. It's the offspring. This would be like if you had a baby, and the baby had twice as much DNA as you, and it lived on you like a parasite. And it did meiosis to make these things called spores that it sprinkles around as you walk about. That grow into new gametophyte offspring. Only you're a gametophyte moss plant, so you're totally non-modal and you're not walking around, you're just hanging out in that one area.
How does it turn back into haploid?
Oh, the meiosis.
Oh.
So that's right, we make 4 cells.
Oh, yeah.
Divide twice without doubling the DNA.
Okay.
So yeah, so that's, I'll write this word better so you can actually read it. This is meiosis. That's where a diploid sporophyte grown on top of the gametophyte makes spores. The spores are really, really small. You're going to get a chance to look at spores, not s'mores. That would be delicious. Spores. They're really small. They have good surface area because they're spherical, and the wind can carry them to all sorts of places. So the sporophyte needs to grow up really nice and tall so it can fill its spore capsule with spores. And literally, it makes so many spores that it bursts. And the idea is that they'll be caught by the wind and drift for a little bit before they fall to a new area. But let's be realistic. Moss just isn't that big, so we're not spreading over, the vast reaches of the plains or anything. Does that make sense to everybody? Good. That is the alternation of generations. I know some of you guys had some questions. Does that sort of clarify about alternation of generation? It's literally the offspring of that generation, but has a different amount of DNA. So this would be like if your sperm was not actually sperm, but a living thing that lived inside of you and made sperm for you. Or eggs for if you're a lady. Yep, you're welcome for that. I want to pull this down. Don't worry, I'll still have it there. And it's on YouTube, so you can pull up the video. And it will be on YouTube later today. You can pull it up, pause it, copy that down to your heart's content. There's 3 main types There are mosses. These are the most successful type. These are the ones that you usually see. They're great at colonizing because their sporophyte gets bigger than everybody else's sporophyte. However, moss is actually relatively difficult to sustain, especially out in the wilderness. Anybody want to guess why?
Doesn't it grow in shade?
Yeah, it grows in shade, but that's more because of its need for what?
Moisture.
Moisture, right? It's got to live in a damp environment. If it was in the sun, it would get too dried out. They can grow in the sun too. They do photosynthesis like other plants. But, yeah. Some have actually evolved, some of them that have really long sporophytes, they actually have primitive conductive tissues in the sporophytes, like the precursor to vascular tissue. So mosses are going to be at the end of the cladogram. They're the most distal. They're the most modified. They're the closest thing to vascular plants. And our next lecture after this will be about vascular plants. And you get to see them doing all vascular things. You'll be able to draw connections between them and moss pretty easily. So those are mosses. They look like this. So here's moss. What are these things coming out that look like golf clubs? Those are the sporophytes. That's a living organism. See all this down here? Those are the gametophytes. This is a whole colony of them. Moss lives in big old colonies. One individual would look like a little leaf or a little sprig of moss. That's one living organism. It's got little leaf-like things sticking out the sides, and we'll talk later why they're not leaves, but for now we just say leaves and put like quoting marks. So here's like probably about 50 moss hanging out. A lot of them have their sporophytes sticking out, their parasitic little offspring. Yep, that's it. All right, let's talk about the other kind. Yeah. Nah, we'll just make 100 run back and forth. All right, liverwort, this is another kind. When you look at them, they have a cellular arrangement that's very similar to livers. If you look at them under the dissecting scope, it actually looks like a big green liver. It shouldn't have been green eggs and ham. It should have been green eggs and liver. They actually have these little scales. The phylum name is, well, you'll see the phylum name. They have no cuticle, nothing to cover them, which means they don't need stomata. They just absorb gases right through the leaf parts, right through what looks like their scaly skin. Right? So there's just no cuticle, just these gaping open holes. But that also means, what are they going to lose a lot of? They can pull in a lot of oxygen and CO2 that way. What are they going to lose a lot of? They lose a lot of water. So as a result, they get out competed by moss, and they grow really well on rocks that are on the sides of the river. The place where Mr. Farm and I usually go to find these things, we literally go down the rivers of Knox County, find a big old rock that's sitting on the side that when the river swells is going to be covered in water. Because these literally need to be covered completely in water from time to time to survive. So it actually makes them, like for private use, relatively easy to maintain. You just get like a flat sheet and fill it with water, and every once in a while just flood the thing. Yep. So yeah, they like to be submerged. They like to be buried in water. That's, you know. Why didn't you write that when I was saying it? Why do you have to wait till it appears on the PowerPoint screen to decide if it's important or not?
Submerged is a good word.
Submerged is a good word. And Hunter, I bet you can guess what's coming now. Here it is. Look at that. Oh, liverworty. Doesn't look very livery. Now you see these here, these little heart-shaped things. Yes, no, maybe. Each one of those is one gametophyte. You see these things that kind of look like, I don't know, palm trees if you had an aerial view? They grow and they stick out their little palm-looking top. And what's that, Parker?
Is that the I'm trying to find it. The sporophyte.
Yeah, that's a sporophyte. Perfect. And these actually, I've never seen a liverwort sporophyte in real life. So if you guys find any, like out in the wild, that have their sporophyte, bring them in, bonus points. Just remember, they get out competed by moss. They live in a similar environment from moss. So don't take all of them or they won't be back next year. These sporophytes, they don't grow very tall because no conductive tissue. They need to be covered in water. But they grow, they stick these out, and they explode like a huge cloud of spores. It's really cool, I've been told. We'll get to see it in real life. And then we'll do the final non-vascular plant. Thank you, man. The hornworts. Their sporophyte looks like a big old gnarly horn. That's why they're called hornwort. Wart is like an old word for plant. See how it's got an O in it? Not wart like what's on your foot, but wart like archaic word for plant. They have huge gaping mouths, just like, that one kid that saw was like, that's what hornworts are like. Huge stomata. They look kind of like seaweed. Most of them are aquatic. There are some terrestrial-ish, but they're about as terrestrial as all the other non-vascular plants. And they're green everywhere, varying shades of green, from dark green to light green. We will not be looking at these in the lab, so therefore you will see this picture right here. Here they are! See this big old pile of mush? Guess what that is?
The hornworts.
Yeah, those are the gametophytes for the hornworts. That's their dominant generation, and they've got their parasitic little horn sporophytes that stick out of there, and they develop their spores up here in the tip, I believe.